Hello, this is Snugglefairy, and today I'm doing a takeoff, landing and basic flight tutorial for the Mi-24 Hunt. This aircraft does not really like to hover very well, especially when it's fully loaded or in a low density atmosphere. So for learning, keep your aircraft as light as possible. Right now I don't have any weapons on board and I got about 40% fuel. So the controls you have in the helicopter are your cyclic in the middle, you got your rudder pedals down there, and you got your collective here. So all these three controls have to work together in order to fly the aircraft correctly and efficiently. The cyclic affects your pitch and roll, the rudder pedals affect your yaw, and the collective increases the blade pitch up and down, making you go up and down. The controls I'm gonna need for this exercise are the brake and parking brake, as well as the trimmer, the two trimmers that I have, and a gear lever. So here, this red light indicates that the wheel brake is on, and the default button for the wheel brake is W, and left shift W for the parking brake. Right now the parking brake is on, and you can release it by just tapping the brakes. Also, before takeoff, I'm gonna flick this gear lever lock. It prevents you from raising the gear up when you're on the ground. So before takeoff, I flick it up, and I have this gear lever bound to my joystick. The default key commands are left Ctrl G for raising it, and left shift G for lowering it. I'm also going to be using the trimmer. So you got two trimmers in the Mi-24 Hunt. You got this button, the thumb button here. Basically the way it works, so let's say you have the stick deflected to the left, and you have the stick deflected to the left in real life as well. So you press on the trimmer button, and just a quick press, and you return your stick in the physical world to the center. And a stick in the game will stay to the left. I'm gonna demonstrate now. Click trimmer, return the stick to the center, and the stick in the game stays to the left. And the default keybind for that is T. And also you have this trimmer head right here that you can use to fine-tune your trim. Left, right, up, and down. The default key commands are right control semicolon, right control dot, right control comma, and right control /. And you also got trimmer set. The default key is left control T. So I'm gonna do a vertical takeoff on this exercise, and I'm gonna transition to forward flight after that. So first thing I gotta do is I gotta release the parking brake. When you release the parking brake with the default trim in Mi-24, the bird is gonna want to roll forward. I'm gonna compensate that by moving my stick to the back. Press the wheel brakes, and I'm more or less stationary. And I also had to add a little bit of a left pedal to compensate for the yaw. So in order to take off, you need to increase the collective, and also you're gonna need to add right rudder in order to compensate for the yaw. Every time you change the collective, it's gonna affect the yaw, and you have to compensate with the rudder pedals. So I'm gonna take off now. So right now I'm hovering on the edge of ground effects. Ground effect for a helicopter, it's kind of like a cushion underneath you that your rotor blades are pushing against the ground, and it gives you extra lift. But as soon as you leave this ground effect, you lose that lift. So from this point on, make sure you increase collective confidently and progressively, so you don't get caught off guard by that lost lift when you increase the altitude. If you're new to helicopters, don't worry about hovering right away. Hovering is actually pretty difficult. So just transition to forward flight as soon as possible. And you can do some exercises to build your hovering skills later on. In order to transition to forward flight, you need to push your cyclic forward, but that will also make your aircraft lose altitude. So you want to compensate that by increasing the collective. I'm gonna transition to forward flight now. I'm gonna also raise the gear. And after you take off and gain some altitude, you no longer need the anti-dust system, so you can flick it off by flicking the switch off. And anti-dust system does eat a little bit of power, so you don't really want to use it in the air. But don't forget to flick it back on when you're coming in for landing. I'm just gonna gain a little bit of altitude and set into my cruise. At about 300 meters AGL, I'm just gonna level off and I'm gonna trim the aircraft by hitting the T button, and I'm gonna fine tune it after that with the trim hat. So right now I'm flying straight and level, and I want to bring your attention to some gauges here. So this is your speed indicator. You notice it's pointing at about 170 kilometers an hour, and it's also matching with that red mark underneath. This is your regular cruise speed under regular atmospheric conditions. And right down here you got the engine power setting. And you see those yellow marks? They're pointing at the C triangle. C means cruise. You would change those power settings by moving the collective up and down. Higher up it is, higher the power is going to be. So you got the takeoff power at the top, nominal power in the middle, and cruise power at the bottom. Cruise power is the power setting you use just for flying straight and level. And again, it will give you about 270 kilometers an hour. Nominal is when you use that for gaining altitude. And takeoff you use for takeoff. Also, you got this rise and descent indicator here, and it's going to become important in the future exercises. And here you got your slip indicator, this ball in the black ball in a white line, and this is how you determine your aerodynamic slip. You want to keep that ball as close to the middle as possible for a correct and efficient flight. Also, you got this Doppler gauge here that shows you your drift angle. Right now it's showing drift angle 4 degrees to the left. And depending, right now there's no wind, but depending on the wind, that will change. But with no wind, this is how the aircraft is designed to fly. With the ball centered, you're gonna have a 4 degree slip to the left, and that's normal, that's how it's supposed to be. Mi-8 is the same. So you're just trying to keep this ball centered, and you keep in mind that 4-degree drift. And the way you calculate your current flight heading, you take your heading, which is about 89 degrees right now for me, and you subtract these 4 degrees. So you're actually flying 85 degrees right now. So straight, roughly about that way. And again, that's how it's meant to be flown. So what you want to do is you want to practice coordinating your controls, your cyclic and rudder pedals and your elective. As I said, they all have to work together in order for you to make the helicopter do what you want it to do. And one of the exercises you can do to build that skill is you can slow down and speed up with the minimum altitude change. So basically you try to keep this gauge as close to 0 as possible while you slowing down and speeding up. In order to slow down, you need to raise your nose up. You need to bring your cyclic back. But if you bring your cyclic back, you're also gonna start increasing the altitude. The climb rate is gonna go up. So you want to compensate that by decreasing the collective. But when you decrease the collective, also the yaw factor is gonna change, so you're gonna have to adjust with the rudder pedals. And you want to try to keep the ball centered at the same time. I'm gonna demonstrate now. The nose up, decrease the collective. And I am also adding the left pedal a little bit to compensate for the yaw. I'm going to slow down to about 200 kilometers an hour. And I'm going to trim the aircraft for 200 kilometers an hour straight and level flight. So I'm about where I need to be, so I'm going to trim the aircraft here. So in order to keep the slip indicator centered, you need to work together with your cyclic and your pedals. Basically right now I'm gonna yaw a little bit to the right and the ball is gonna go to the left. The ball is telling you right now that you need a left yaw in order to center it, that you're slipping to the left. And let's say right now I just add the left yaw to center the ball. Right now the ball is centered, but also the aircraft is turning left. And I don't want it to do that. So I need to add right cyclic. I need to move the cyclic to the right in order to stop the turn. That stops the turn, and the rudder keeps the ball centered. As I said, they have to work together in order to keep the ball centered and keep you flying in the direction you want to fly. In addition to speeding up and slowing down, another thing you can practice is transitioning to hover from forward flight and then transitioning back to forward flight from hover. Again, in order to slow down, I need to raise my nose up and I need to decrease the collective so I don't gain the altitude, and I need to compensate the yaw with the rudder pedals. So I'm gonna switch to hover now. And it takes a bit in this aircraft. It doesn't like to slow down very well. So it takes a bit of time. As you slow down, your airframe loses lift. You have some wings on the side that generate quite a bit of lift that help you at speeds. But when you slow down, you lose that lift. So as you slow down, you want to progressively add collective to keep your rise and descent gauge as close as possible to 0. Once you pass 50 kilometers an hour, you are in a hover mode. In a hover mode, you cannot allow the descent rate to go below 3 meters per second. If it does, you're gonna enter VRS. VRS is basically your rotor blades are entering their own downwash, and it's gonna basically fall straight to the ground, and you cannot do anything with the collective in order to pull yourself out of it. VRS kills a lot of new pilots, and especially when they're trying to come in for landing. So basically, you either need to stay above 50 kilometers an hour, and above 50 kilometers an hour it does not matter how fast you descend. But under 50 kilometers an hour, you have to make sure it's above 3 meters per second. When you are below 50 kilometers an hour, this gauge comes into play. This is your hover gauge. It shows you which way you're flying, basically. Right now, it's showing me roughly 20 kilometers an hour forward and 20 kilometers an hour to the right. And you can use it. You can use your cyclic in order to cancel out that speed, to go into the perfect hover. I'm gonna demonstrate VRS now. I'm gonna lower my collective until I go past that dangerous descent of 3 meters per second, and it's gonna basically the descent is gonna spike. It's gonna go straight down, and usually there should be some oscillations, some vibrations, but I don't think it's modeled very well right now in the Mi-24 High. It's much more noticeable in the Mi-8. But in order to exit VRS, you need altitude. You need to pitch forward or roll right, roll left, or go backwards. You need to exit that downwash that you're flying through. You need to gain some speed. So I'm gonna enter VRS, and then I'm gonna pitch forward, gain some speed, and try to fly out of it, fly out of that downwash. I've entered VRS, and I'm gonna pitch forward, and I'm gonna increase the collective in order to gain some speed. It's fairly easy to come out of the VRS when you have altitude, but when you're coming in for landing, you don't have altitude. So you gotta be really careful and make sure you don't enter the VRS, because you will not have enough time to pull yourself out of it. And as I said, that kills a lot of new pilots. Another thing you can practice is making coordinated turns. Basically, again, you're trying to keep your climb and descent gauge as close as possible to 0, and you're trying to keep your ball in the center, just like this. I'm rolling left with my cyclic, and I'm adding a little bit of a pedal to the left to keep that ball centered, and I'm going to pitch down a little bit to keep the climb and descent rate gauge as close as possible to 0. And I'm turning left. Climb with the sand gauge is pretty close to 0. And the ball is centered. And these are the exercises you can practice. Again, it doesn't have to be flown this precisely all the time, but it will build your skills in operating this aircraft, so you will be able to make it do exactly what you want it to do. The more you do it, the more proficient you'll get at it, and your brain will know exactly what inputs to do in order to achieve what you want it to do. Okay, we're actually near Kutaisi airfield. I'm gonna set up for rolling landing. And I'm gonna demonstrate landing on the airfield. So I'm in the downwind right now. When I land on doing the running landing onto the airfield, I aim for about 50 to 100 kilometers an hour, as long as it's above 50 kind of thing, when I touch down. So you want to start slowing down preemptively, so I'm going to start doing that. I'm going to reduce my collective, and I'm going to nose up to start slowing down. And I also want to lose some altitude, so I'm going to set about 2 meters per second descent rate. Now I'm gonna flick the anti-dust system back on. It takes a few seconds for it to engage, but you'll be on by the time I get to the airfield. I'm gonna make a base turn. Again, I keep slowing down. And keep dropping altitude slowly. And I'm gonna lower my landing gear. Left-Shift G by default. Landing Mi-24 high on its wheels, it's just like landing a plane. When you are on the ground and taxiing, you're gonna want to use your pedals to turn left and right, and you can use your cyclic forward and back to speed up or slow down, and you can also use the brakes to slow down. And again, the collective, the pedals, and the cyclic all working together to keep me in the attitude I want it to be. Wheels on the ground, and I reduce the collective to 0 immediately. All the way down. And I put some backstick in order to slow down. And I'm gonna push the left pedal in order to exit the runway. I'm gonna put some weapons on, I'm gonna put some more fuel in, and I'm gonna demonstrate a running takeoff as well. Okay, so I got some weapons on board, I got some more fuel on board, and I'm gonna make a left here onto the runway, and I'm gonna stop on the center line. When you're taxiing, you use your rudder pedals to turn left and right, and you use your cyclic forward and back to go forward and slow down. With the default trim, if you just keep the cyclic in the center, it will start rolling forward and it will give you a decent speed. So I just keep it centered. And I'm gonna make a left here onto the center line. Using cyclic back in order to slow down right now, and the yaw to center me. Okay, I am centered, and I'm gonna put the parking brake on for now. Left shift W. The parking brake light is on, and I'm gonna flick this switch up, the gear lock. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna raise the collective until the aircraft feels like it wants to take off, it wants to come off the ground, and then I'm gonna push the cyclic forward and keep raising the collective in order to keep the nose down. And I'm gonna do what's called a nose wheel takeoff. I'm gonna make a run just on the nose wheel. You can make a run on all 3 of your gears, but on the 3 it's a little slower acceleration. And I'm gonna speed up to about 150 kilometers an hour, and then I'm gonna pull the cyclic back and increase the collective further, and it will make me take off. And I'm gonna demonstrate now. Release the brakes. I'm pushing the cyclic back a little bit so it doesn't roll forward, and I'm gonna raise the collective until I feel like it wants to take off. Right now it's about to take off, so I'm gonna push the cyclic forward and increase the collective even more. And it goes on its nose wheel. And I'm gonna keep it on its nose wheel during the takeoff. I'm at about 150 kilometers an hour. Cyclic back, more collective, and I'm off the ground. Gear up. And I'm gonna make a left. And this is gonna wrap up the tutorial for the basic flight, takeoff and landing. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to leave the comments, and I'll try to respond as best as possible. And thank you for watching, and hopefully it was helpful. And I'm gonna make next tutorial. I'm gonna make on all the navigation system this aircraft has, which is quite a few. Stay tuned for that. Snuggle Fairy, check it out.